This is cool, the tape and the Band-Aids, because I never wore batting gloves. And I used pine tar, obviously. And then that was a trademark. I'd say 90% of the time I played, I always had my pants up and my socks low, like the old timers. And the cool thing is all the veins popping out. They don't have them now.
Time. It does a lot of things to us. Like putting space between who we are and who we once were. Which makes it harder and harder to hold on to our greatest moments.
This brings back a lot of memories.
But as impossible as it might sound, there are ways to go back in time.
Here he is, George Brett.
George Brett, the best hitter in the American League, and couldn't have a better man up.
Because in certain pursuits, if you work hard enough, if you can embed yourself indelibly in one place, you can turn yourself into not just a star, but a legend. Which means your greatest moments will live on years afterwards. Be recognized and remembered generations later. Frozen in time. And your name can echo through the chambers of history forever.
Okay, we're rolling and we got speed. We're gonna wait 5 seconds to make sure we got a clean cut.
You're getting too good at this.
He wasn't any different than any of the great players that I played against. And I played against Mays, Aaron, Ernie Banks, Seaver. George Brett was one of those guys.
He was a 13-time All-Star and the only player in Major League history to win a batting title in 3 different decades. But what made George Brett the kind of player no fan would ever forget was an uncommon combination of relentless intensity and boyish charm.
I so much wish I was more like George when I played. Fans in Philly would have ate him up. I was a little bit more like this when I played, and George was like, you know, he was almost part of the crowd when he played.
Every time you played against George Brett, you felt like you had jumped on your bicycle, ridden down to the Little League field, and you played a pickup game of baseball.
Okay, now we got the leading hitter of the American League coming in right here.
How can a guy be this good and seem like he didn't take the game that seriously?
Larry, you come off a really year last year. What are you gonna do about it?
Well, main thing I'll try and, boy, that was tough. They're not gonna tape that, are they?
But we all know that George took the game extremely seriously because we've seen him in action a few times when he wasn't the happiest guy in the world.
Brett went in hard, and both teams are out on the field.
But the numbers keep coming at you. Like being one of just 5 players ever with 3,000 hits, 300 homers, and a career batting average over 300.
I'd always admired the guy. Brett carried thunder in the barrel.
Set by Gossage, a high drive and deep to right field. It is gone.
George Brett was a better hitter than I was. He was the best hitter in our era.
Always kind of wanted to be like George as a hitter. He could do a lot of things with the bat that I could not do.
Every time I go up there, I know I'm going to hit the ball hard, and I know I'm going to get a hit. It doesn't always happen, but I have that feeling every time I go up in that box.
With us, he was the guy. They used to say, here comes George Brett and the Kansas City Royals. The bigger the situation, it's like the more fun he was having. I don't think pressure bothered him. I think he really relished having the pressure situation.
I was always one of those guys that was scared to death before the game, every game. I mean, nervous. You're in the dugout, and my heart would start beating, and all of a sudden you're running out there, and man, I'm scared to death.
Fear is what drove George Brett. And no question it originated with his father. The way he was raised, his father was incredibly hard on him, probably harder on him than has ever been fully revealed.
George Brett's story began far from Kansas City, on the California coast, where he was raised as the youngest of 4 brothers.
Grew up in a really small town, El Segundo, just south of the LA airport. And it seemed like every day of the summer at 9 o'clock, me and my brothers would go up to the corner. We'd hitchhike down to Manhattan Beach. And pretty much every day we were at the beach and body surfing and just kind of hanging out.
George was a little bit of a slacker as a kid. It was his brother, Ken, who was the All-American boy.
Ken Brett, 5 years older than George, was the 4th overall pick in the 1966 draft, who just a year later would pitch in the '67 World Series at age 19 and go on to a 14-year big league career.
I idolized Ken when I got to know him, just like George did as his older brother. We thought Ken was the greatest thing in the world.
They say Ken might have been the best athlete ever to come out of Southern California. A lot of people have told me that. Tough shoes to fill.
George showed promise as a ball player himself as a kid, but struggled to earn the approval of his father, Jack Brett.
A military guy, got wounded over in France in 1944, and he raised us kind of like a military dad would. You screwed up, you paid the price, and sometimes it wasn't pretty. It wasn't wait for your mother to come home and scold you in the bedroom or slap you. It was bam. It was tough. It was tough.
Okay, so I was going through old pictures yesterday, trying to find pictures, and there were these 3 publications from the El Segundo newspaper. And in it, there's one little passage that says, Jack Brett, your grandfather, on Right, Wrong, and Rogues. I was a great dad as far as I was concerned. Do what I want, and you got everything I had to give. But you do what I don't want, and I'll kick your damned ass. And you'll be lucky if that's all I kick. The thing that I will never stand for is that you think I'm dumb. If you think I'm dumb, I'll show you how smart I am. Don't pull that on me. What's incredible to me is he admitted that in the paper.
Yeah,
so
crazy.
if that's what he was admitting to doing in the paper, you know he was doing a lot worse than that, which he was.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he just hit him.
Yeah.
I think he hit him and hit him and hit him and hit him.
That's insane.
It's insane.
It's funny, I was scared to death of him. I was intimidated by him my whole life. Growing up as the youngest of 4 boys and always being criticized that I'm not as good as my brother in this, I'm not as good as this brother, I'm not as smart as that guy, you know, everything. I couldn't do anything right.
And yet, George was a good enough ball player to be picked in the 2nd round of the 1971 draft by the Kansas City Royals, a franchise in its 3rd year of existence. He'd move up pretty quickly in the minors, but hardly gave off the scent of a future star.
Well, he wasn't a big deal in the minor leagues. He wasn't a blue chip, can't miss guy. First time he got to the big leagues, wearing number 25, I remember just watching him, and there was nothing special at the moment.
He hit just 125 in 40 at-bats in a cameo in 1973, but got the starting job as the Royals' 3rd baseman the following year. By June, his continuing struggles brought him to a breaking point.
Was hitting 200 with no power, no nothing, and was just lost. I was just totally lost.
And that's when Royals hitting coach Charlie Lau approached him and helped change the course of George Brett's career forever.
He says, I've been watching you. I think you could play. I'm the only coach here, George, that thinks you belong in the major leagues. But I've watched you now for 200 at-bats. You haven't made one adjustment. And I said, I don't know what adjustments to make. This is how I've hit my whole life. And he said, I'm going to help you, but you got to give me your heart and soul.
I don't know if people realize or understand how hard he worked. Charlie standing next to him, just going through it, work, work, work.
I had a bad habit of wrapping my bat around my head. Every time my hands went back, my hands went like this. I just couldn't stop it. So we were sitting there, he's scratching his head, he's trying to figure out, he says, just put the bat right here on your shoulder. I put it there and then I couldn't wrap it around my head. He said, there, you're hitting like that. That's the only way I could do it.
At first, he wasn't really driving the ball, but just getting base hits. And then as he got more comfortable with it, then he started driving balls the opposite field. It just flourished from there.
We set a goal to hit 250 by the end of the year. And I'll never forget, a month and a half later, I got to 250. And I came back in the dugout and I said, Charlie, we made it. We got it to 250. He said, what are you talking about? We're going 260.
He'd continue to raise his batting average throughout that 1974 season, all the way to 282. The next year, he'd lead the AL in hits and bat .308, while helping Kansas City to the best season in the young franchise's history. The future was looking bright for both the Royals and their young star third baseman.
Right side, back to the right, gentlemen, both hands, right side.
My pants last night. I did. I'm good twice a year for that. When was the last time you your pants?
Me?
Yeah. Been a while?
It's been a long time.
I was in Vegas a couple years ago. Just an honest-to-God true story. Staying at the Bellagio. I went over to the Mirage for dinner, met some friends of mine over there.
The Vegas story is, hearing him tell that in person now is the funniest thing, because he's way more animated.
Went to Kokomo's, a great little steakhouse. The guy brings out some fresh crab legs. These just came in, I got to give them to you guys. I'm eating them. Then we go play gamble a little bit. I had a tea time early in the morning. So I said, look, I got to get going. I'm walking back to the hotel. I get 3/4 of the way out of the lobby, and all of a sudden I go, oh, and I'm standing here like this. I got my butt pinched so I can't move. All of a sudden, you know, felt all right. I went just like this. Water.
No way.
I had some food poisoning from the crabs. Take off my leather jacket, tied it around my waist, and I'm just standing there, and it's just running down my leg.
I truly believe he just forgot the mic was on and forgot he was mic'd up that day. And that story is so on brand, it's not even funny.
True story. Who's the pitchers in this game?
There are two sides to him. There's a fun-loving, happy-go-lucky guy who likes to drink wine and used to like shellfish. And then there's the baseball side of him, and it's kind of perfect.
As a 23-year-old, it was clear that the baseball side of George Brett was headed towards big things in Kansas City.
In '75, when I hit 300 for the first time, Hal McRae came up to me at the end of the season, and he said, you're screwed now. And I go, why is that? He says, they're going to expect you to hit 300 every year. And I said, well, I expect it now.
76, he comes into the year with a different level of confidence. That's also when the Royals really first came on the scene. So there was something exciting happening in Kansas City.
The Royals beat the Yankees 3-1.
And George was in the middle of all of it.
Couple good years in the big leagues, and all of a sudden you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and you're on the cover of Sport Magazine, you're on the cover of Sporting News.
George was pretty down to earth. In fact, it seemed like he was more Midwest than California. And he embraced the city and vice versa. I think everybody realized that they had a star.
That was my rookie year, 76. I was in awe, like, look at this guy. I mean, it seemed like every day it was 3 hits, every day.
George Brett with his third hit of the day.
3-hit night for George Brett.
For a stretch that May, it really was every day, as Brett put together a remarkable run of 6 straight games with at least 3 hits. Still a major league record.
I think I had a 5 and a 4 in there, and 4 3-hit games in a row. Yeah, that'll help your average a little bit, won't it?
As the hits kept piling up, Brett found himself in a race for the batting championship with Hal McRae. The teammates led the Royals to the team's first AL West crown, with the race for the batting title coming down to the final game of the season.
George Brett and Hal McRae were right in the middle of the batting title going down to the final day.
We were playing the Twins the last game of the year, and I think at one time they had to carry the numbers out 5 digits to see who was winning. I might have been hitting 332, 165. Hal McRae was hitting 332, 191, you know, whatever. And I remember I got 3 hits that day, and my last at bat, I hit an inside the park home run.
Brett hit a routine fly ball to the left, and the Minnesota left fielder didn't see it, didn't play it well. The wind was not much of a factor, a little bit, and the ball dropped. And Hal McRae thought, well, maybe they'd let the ball drop so George and not Mac could win the batting title.
You know, all I did was hit it and run. I mean, I don't know what happened. And then Hal grounded out, and I ended up winning the batting championship, and Hal was pissed. And it took a little fun out of it.
Hal's emotions took over, and he started blaming Gene Mock, who was the manager of the Twins, that, hey, you told the white guy to let it fall in, and it got bad after the game.
It never affected me and Hal's friendship. I always considered him one of the closest teammates, but winning your first batting championship, and then there's a little bit of controversy, it took a little fun out of it.
Here we are, we're supposed to be celebrating, let's go to the playoffs, and it was a little tense there. But then it smoothed over real quickly, and it was forgotten.
Now let's meet the starting lineup. Here's the man who guided the Yankees to their first postseason play in 12 years, the Yankee manager, Billy Martin.
I had said something before the playoffs. I'm 23 years old, and they said, hey, first playoff playing the Yankees. I said, yeah, I'd really like to beat them because they traded my brother. That's all it was. And then Billy's in the dugout, your brother was horse shit. That's why we traded him. You. Stuff like that. You know, Billy being Billy. And I'm going, what's wrong with this dude? You know, I never even said 2 words about it. And I remember that year in spring training, my brother was with him. And first time I ever faced my brother Ken. He's pitching for the Yankees in spring training, comes over to Fort Myers. He always said he was going to drill me. First pitch he threw was kind of up and in, and then he threw me a fastball. I hit a home run over the center field fence off him. And as I'm rounding third base, pitchers don't normally just stand on the mound. He comes over and he shakes my hand before I get to home plate. And we're laughing, so he goes back to the dugout, and Billy, as a joke, all the guys in the Yankee dugout, they get up and sit down the right field line, and my brother is sitting in the dugout all by himself. So I thought Billy had a sense of humor. That year in the playoffs, he did not have a sense of humor, and he never had a sense of humor about me the rest of his life. I never was his friend and didn't want to be his friend.
So emotions were high as the Royals' first ever postseason began. And the series would match the intensity, with the teams trading wins over the first 4 games, which set up a deciding Game 5 in New York.
I had a feeling that George was going to do something dramatic. It didn't take a genius to figure that out because he did a lot of very dramatic things.
In the top of the 8th, the Royals would be trailing by 3 runs, when Brett got his chance to do something dramatic, stepping to the plate with 2 runners on against lefty Grant Jackson.
Charlie Lau, my hitting coach, he kind of, come here, I want to talk to you. Standing on the on-deck circle, I go over to the dugout, and he says, this guy really has a tough time getting the ball away from left-handers. Move off the plate another inch or 2 and just react.
I talked to George yesterday, and he said he doesn't try to go for home runs unless the situation warrants it. He represents a tie and run. High drive, hit to right field. Home run. It's gone. There it is. The ball game is tied. And you can hear the quiet of this crowd.
But it turned out that the biggest moment of George Brett's career to that point would be just a footnote in baseball history.
We'll go to the bottom of the 9th inning now, and Chris Chambliss steps up, and the crowd comes alive here. Delivers high drive, hits it right center field. That's good. Go. Chris Chambliss has won the American League pennant for the New York Yankees.
George, when you hit the home run, you're not a home run hitter, but 2 were on at the time. Were you going for a home run at that time, George?
Yeah.
No base hit, going for the 3-run home.
The fence is 310 feet. I think I can hit one that far. So I tried to hit one 310 feet.
George, you couldn't have tried any harder, and just congratulations to the Royals. It's too bad somebody had to lose.
I came up number 25, and I think it was after my first full season. Al Zeke, our equipment manager, called me and he said, "We just traded Richie Scheinblum. I want you to wear number 5. And I go, "Al, I don't give a crap what number I am." He says, "No, I think you're going to be a pretty good third baseman. I know you like Brooks Robinson. You play number 5. That's the number of their position. I think it would be great." I said, "Fine, give me number 5." Now number 5's up above the scoreboard, so it's pretty cool.
By 1977, number 5 was a firmly established star in Kansas City. And with the Royals one of baseball's best teams, George Brett's popularity had gone national too, and the fit was pretty good.
George was larger than life. You know, he was this young bachelor you would see around town. He would be at the bars. He was incredibly charismatic.
You know, I'm single and, you know, successful and making good money at the time. And the more famous you are, it just opened a lot of doors.
I mean, it was crazy. He was a rock star. He was an absolute rock star. We'd go out every night and have fun like 22, 23-year-old kids would do. That's what we did.
I shouldn't say. I was going to say there isn't a bar in the country he hadn't closed at one point.
I've never seen a guy have so much fun in his life. I mean, he was always the center of attention. George knows how to have fun.
Most players didn't hang out with each other too much on opposing teams. But there was one instance, George and Jamie and I, we were out fairly late. Got back to the hotel, and George couldn't have got more than a couple hours of sleep because he had to get to the airport and go to whatever city they were playing in the next day. And after we played our game that night and got up the next day and looked in the newspaper, George went 4 for 4. He could handle burning the candle on both ends.
Brett was on top of the world. Not just a baseball star, but a bona fide sports celebrity. Still, it never seemed good enough for his father.
I remember one time when we were playing the Angels out in Southern California, and I had won a batting championship and had some success and, you know, was making some good money. And after a game, we were going to a friend of his house that lived out in the Anaheim area. And he just started screaming at me in the car for embarrassing him and the family. I remember one time he was in Kansas City staying with me and my wife, and I had a really bad game. And I just called my wife and I said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" She said, "Well, your dad went to bed." And I said, "I'm just going to stay here. Tell him I'll see him tomorrow night for dinner." I stayed in the locker room, didn't even go home.
There was something unhealthy about how hard George's father was on him. I think that you start every game being afraid because it's never going to be good enough for your dad.
On the field, the pressures hardly showed. In '77, Brett would lead the Royals to a 102-win season, a second straight AL West title, and another matchup with the Yankees in the ALCS.
It's really one of the great rivalries in baseball history because those two teams were just so chock full of incredible characters.
It was intense, and we genuinely didn't like each other. You know, they had the Yankees, the big, powerful guys from New York, and here we are, the Midwest, and the little lowly Kansas City Royals.
The rivalry between Kansas City and the Yankees was sportsman hate, you know, is what I'll say.
I was in baseball 49 years as a player and a coach. I've never seen intenseness like those two teams played, and we both knew it. Okay, here's the playoffs. We're supposed to end up here. Let's go.
Over the first 4 games of the ALCS, the team's shared hatred was plain to see. It would again all come down to a decisive Game 5, with the tension and temperature peaking.
This is it. The American League Championship. The whole season comes down to 9 innings of baseball between the Royals and the New York Yankees.
It didn't take much for anybody there on either side to get into a ruckus. I'll never forget the slide that George had in the third base with Nettles.
First inning, I hit a triple off Guidry.
Right center field. Mickey Rivers chasing it hard. He cannot get it. Here comes McCray. He will score easily. Brett is playing for 3 to throw.
Close play at third base. I remember sliding, and you're going all out. Slid late. and my momentum took me over the bag. As I came up, I kind of pushed Greg. He took offense to it, and he just kicks me right in the mouth with his left foot. And I kind of go like that, going, what the hell was that? And I just get up and throw a haymaker at him.
It didn't take long. The explosion was expected.
That's all it took. You know, George was playing with fire, and Nettles was playing with fire.
Greg Nettles kicked Brett after Brett slid. Brett came up swinging.
Nettles kicked him. What are you going to do? You're going to get up, and George didn't care who it was. You're going to kick him. He's going to fight.
You can see how the bad blood continues between these two ball clubs.
Thurman Munson comes up, and he's one of the first guys in the pile. But I'll never forget this. He's laying on top of me, shielding me. He said, George, it's Thurman. I got you covered. No one's going to take any pot shots at you. How cool was that?
It would be a blow for the Royals if George Brett is ejected.
I don't think anyone got thrown out of the game.
Nobody got kicked out of the game.
Like, nothing makes less sense. Everybody was just like, all right, let's let cooler heads prevail and let's play ball.
Unfortunately for Brett and the Royals, though, when play resumed, it would be the Yankees who finished on top and grabbed another pennant.
In time, double play, the ball game is over. The Yankees win the American League pennant. That says it all for the Kansas City Royals and their stunned fans.
It was a tough one, especially that one at home. We lost in Yankee Stadium. You get to see them celebrate, which was really bad. But when they celebrate on your own field, that's tough. That's really hard. I mean, that was a tough one to swallow. Then we face them again the next year. Crazy.
In Game 3 of the '78 ALCS, number 5 would put on a show against Catfish Hunter at Yankee Stadium.
That pitch is hit high in the air and deep to right. It is gone in the upper deck for Brett. Brett hits it well again. Rivers turns his back, goes back. It is gone. Brett is 2 for 2.
The performance that George put on was, I don't know, maybe he might have been Mr. October that day. He was a bad man.
George Brett hits it to right field. Is it 3 in a row? Yes! Incredible! What a performance!
George, every year in the postseason, was at a different level. That moment would be seared in baseball history forever, if not for the game they lose.
Brett's heroics were for naught, and the Royals would ultimately drop the series in 4 games.
Yankees win. And Keith, it's happening all over again. Kansas City has lost to the Yankees 3 years in a row. I suspect bitterly disappointed.
We lost to the Yankees in 76, 77, 78. I've never gotten over that. I don't like them. I told Dayton Moore a few years ago, we weren't very good. I said, I hope we go 6-156 this year. Beat the Yankees 6 times and lose every other game.
Early on in that season, 1980, there was a Miss USA pageant hosted by Bob Barker.
Yeah.
One more girl, and she is Miss New York, Deborah Sue Maurice, 21, New York City.
I think I'd like to get into sports broadcasting.
Oh, you would? Do you have a background in sports?
Well, I have a boyfriend who plays in sports.
Who's your boyfriend?
His name is George Brett.
George Brett is one of the finest players in baseball. You suppose old George is watching us tonight?
I'm sure he is.
A little embarrassing because I was sitting around watching it with some friends of mine, and one of them was a girl. She looks at me and goes, what? After she said all that, she thought she'd surprise me and fly into Kansas City for a few days.
The Royals began 1980 on a mission. George Brett's club had missed the playoffs for the first time in 4 seasons the year before and were hungry to get back to October.
I think if we ever do get a chance to play in the playoffs again, that if I was a betting man, I'd bet on the Royals, but I'm not a betting man.
Usually I started the season hitting about 220 in April, and then around May I would start getting hot.
How about that George Brett of the Kansas City Royals? Is he ever hot?
I just remember that I was seeing the ball good, and then I missed those 30 games with my ankle injury. I was stealing second base, boom, rolled my ankle, missed 6 weeks. We didn't have rehabs then. Hell, as soon as you were able to play, you were in the lineup. And I came back and I didn't miss a beat.
The 1-1 pitch. Swing and a drive, hit deep down the right field line. Mike Deep, it's fair, it's gone, it is there! Home run for George Brett!
2 weeks later, he's among the league leaders in batting average.
I've never seen a hitter on fire like that.
How in the world do you pitch to George Brett?
It seemed like he got 4 hits every day.
All of a sudden, your average is 360, now it's 390. I'll never forget going over 400. It was a 3-hit game against Toronto. I remember standing on second base and everybody's going crazy, so I look up at the scoreboard, it was 401.
Some kind of hitter.
Yeah, okay.
And all the media comes in after the game and they say, hey, are you going to hit 400? It seemed like every day more media showed up.
George, since you went over the 400 mark, have you given any thought to that?
Well, I've given it thought because that's all I've been talking about lately, mainly because that's all I've been doing is talking to writers, it seems like.
And little did I know, for the next month, I'd be over 400.
Serious run at becoming the first 400 hitter since 1941.
People would wake up every morning and say, what is George Brett hitting? And that was across the country.
It was like, holy, you know what? This guy's hitting 400. It's getting pretty late in the year.
In fact, no one in decades has been able to do what he's done. Carry a 400 average into September.
You rooted for him to hit 400.
I was rooting for him hard.
I'm just hitting the ball where it's pitched and everything's paying off right now.
How many of you think George Brett's going to bat 400 this year?
Then I did the one drastic thing I shouldn't have. I tried to hit 400. And once I got below 400, I started pressing more and more and more.
There's so much pressure in what he was trying to do, and you know that every pitcher's trying to get him out.
Brett's mini slump in late September left him at 390 to finish the year. Along the way, he led the Royals to their 4th division title in 5 years and would be named AL MVP. But as ever, none of it seemed to impress his father.
Saw him after the 80 season, and the first thing he says to me, you couldn't have got 5 more hits? Hit 390. I missed 400 by 5 hits. If you would have taken better care of yourself, you would have got 5 more hits. There wasn't a lot of positive stuff. I mean, there never was.
Here we go again. The Yankees and the Kansas City Royals meeting in the playoffs for the 4th time in 5 years.
The reward for an historic season was a familiar one. Yet another matchup with the Yankees in the ALCS.
If we can go out and play the way we've played so far this season and forget the New York Yankees, just go out there and play baseball, I think we can beat them 3 out of 5.
I think that was probably the most intense I've seen our guys. Okay, you've beaten us 3 times, but we're not going to let it happen a 4th time.
Hit in the air to deep left center field. Brown going back and looking up. Gone! George Brett has just hit the 5th home run of his championship series career.
They dominated that series, and the Royals finally sort of put it all together.
Here it is, Nettles goes down the white for 1, back to first, double play, the Royals win!
The Royals 1 game away, 1 win away from the World Series.
There was a feeling in that clubhouse, this is it.
Oh, here's the game on the line right now in the 7th inning.
He really felt all that weight. Made it hard to breathe.
2-1 Yankees, 7th inning. George Brett, 390 on the season, but 0 for 3 tonight. Brett facing the right-hander Gossage in the 7th inning of the 3rd game of the American League playoffs.
Goose comes in, you know, he's snorting and he's got it all, you know, he's Goose.
So the big man coming out of the Yankee pen.
No radar gun back then, but it was 100.
I was very excited to see Goose come in the game because he's the type of guy I like to face.
Tying run for the Royals over at third base. Lead run potentially over at first base.
George is coming up, and we know he's going to do something.
And I just said one thing to myself: be quick and try to pull the ball.
That was the season and the year that in the meetings, they just said, don't pitch him inside because he'll hit a home run.
Set by Gossage, a high drive and deep to right field. It is gone! 3-run home run by George Brett into the 3rd tier of Yankee Stadium. And Brett has taken the Royals and put them in front. Put them in front here in the 7th inning. The Royals now lead it 4-2. And a stunned crowd here at Yankee Stadium in New York.
George hit it up there, and we're going, that's our guy.
He has a flair for the dramatic, and he has come through again.
If you look back at the tape, this didn't happen back in that time. We came at home plate. It wasn't a walk-off. The game was not over yet. But a bunch of us met him at home plate, which you don't see that. That's how big that home run was.
What more can be said about that man?
That was it. I mean, it was like, man, the monkey's off our shoulder, but it's more like an elephant on your shoulders.
Called strike 3, and Kansas City wins the pennant.
George Brett, here's a hero of tonight's game along with a whole bunch of other people. George, I know it's been a long time, the 4th time the magic number.
What made it so special, it was because we lost to the Yankees in 76, 77, 78.
Losing those 3 and then coming back and winning this one. Nobody picked us to win our division. Nobody picked us to beat the Yankees. We surprised everybody again. What a year.
For us to beat them, it was something really, really special. The town went crazy. So it was a big moment for Kansas City, and obviously a big moment for me. It's one that I'll never forget.
The crazy thing is that leads to a World Series where George has sort of his lowest moment.
There he is, George Brett.
So I go to the doctor before the first game of the World Series up in Philadelphia. And he says, have you been under any stress lately? And I said, well, yeah, I just tried to hit 400 and failed at that. We just beat the Yankees for the first time, and we play your Philadelphia Phillies tomorrow, first game of the World Series. He said, oh, okay, stress can cause hemorrhoids.
The big story revolves around George Brett. There was some thought that he would not even be able to play tonight. He has hemorrhoids.
Yeah, we didn't really know a lot about that.
How that stuff all got public back then with George.
The Royals have had to bring in Dave Chalk to play third. Evidently, George Brett's hemorrhoid condition has forced him to the sidelines.
George Brett is missing a World Series game because his butt hurts? It's like, really?
I've never experienced so much discomfort as having hemorrhoids.
I flew home from Philadelphia, and they had a car take me right to the hospital, and they operated on me that night.
The Phillies are out in front of this series, having swept the 2 games at Veterans Stadium. But as the Royals prep for this game, George Brett has made a successful recovery from a hemorrhoid condition.
Here's third baseman George Brett.
A part of him was just devastated. And a part of him could see the dark humor of what happened.
The embarrassment is gone. I'm making a joke out of it. My problem's behind me now.
They had me patched up pretty good down there, and my first at-bat, I think I hit a home run.
Hit to that big part of the ballpark.
Well hit. This ball may be out of here. It is 1-0. Listen to this crowd.
Afterwards, somebody said, that's the first World Series hit ever in Kansas City. And they can never take that away. And it was a home run.
He had a good World Series. He did. One of the big things I remember with George about the World Series was Dickie Knowles knocking him down. It changed the entire complexion of the World Series. And from that point on, everybody on their team stopped hitting.
The Phillies, of course, had Schmidt, but they also had Pete Rose and Steve Carlton and Tug McGraw. I mean, like, that's an all-time great team. Having sort of a sidelined and hurt George Brett did not help at all.
Here's a typical dad thing. Calls me and says, couldn't play with hemorrhoids? I go, no. 15 years go by, my brother Bobby calls me, or John calls me, or Ken calls me and says, hey, you talked to Dad lately? I go, no, why? And he said, he's in the hospital. And I go, what's wrong? He said he had hemorrhoid surgery. I call him, he answers the phone, hello? I said, you can't even sit behind a desk and you're giving me because I couldn't run and slide?
Yeah, look. Feeling pretty good, too. I had no idea what I was going to do in 1980, and all of a sudden, through my total surprise, I went out and had the best year of my career. I don't know what to expect for the following year, but I do expect to get in the World Series again.
After his dream season in 1980, George Brett had high hopes for a huge follow-up the following year. But with the 1981 campaign interrupted by a mid-season strike, his production would end up dropping off.
We did a Sports Illustrated cover leading into the season, and then we had the strike in 1981, and then they redid that exact same cover, except on the second one it said, here we go again.
All of a sudden they give you 50 days off in the middle of the season. I didn't want to come back, and my performance showed.
Brett would hit just 6 home runs, but still manage a .314 batting average. Still, an injury late in the season, by now a familiar twist in the story, would leave his frustration boiling over with the press.
I mean, I'm pissed. I might have a broken frickin' ankle. The last thing in the world you want is some frickin' guy taking your picture going to the hospital. And he kept taking them, so I swung my crutch at him and knocked the camera out of his hand.
He did have a couple run-ins with, I think, one of the writer, Mike Fish, wrote about, well, shouldn't you be in bed and rehabbing? Or, well, I'm not going to rehab at 1 in the morning.
There was a lot going on in George's life, for sure. And he did get hurt a lot. I mean, he really did. There were long stretches of time when you would see an injured George, a slumping George, and it did not look good.
And to make things worse, the combination of his stardom and his struggles had made him a regular target for fans on the road.
It was absolutely brutal. Every on-deck circle you go to, I mean, you just heard hemorrhoid jokes. Stupid jokes that you hear them every single day. You're the butt of everybody's joke, let's face it, and it just gets old. It gets old. Well, up until July 24th, 1983. And everybody forgot about it.
July 24th, 1983 began like any other Sunday with an afternoon game in the Bronx. And it looked like it would end quietly, with the Royals trailing by 1, with 2 out and no one on in the 9th.
They want this strikeout, Frank, and I know Del Murray wants it too.
Ground ball, and Smalley cannot get it. Base hit for Washington.
What a big base hit by UL Washington, and the reason for that is because it brings up George Brett.
Well, Billy Martin is on his way out to the mound.
And I assume that it will be Gus Gossage that will be coming into this ballgame.
And I remember that Murray guy, he kind of had the split finger. Oh my God, there's no way I was gonna hit that guy. But Goose was the type of guy that I'd like to face in that situation.
And Gossage with the ball.
I remember the first pitch he threw me was a fastball kind of up and away. I hit a foul ball down the left field line that I thought was gonna be a home run.
Slicing foul.
And then before the next pitch, I just said, you gotta be quick. You just gotta be quick. And Goose to this day says, I was trying to hit you in the neck. And I didn't get it in far enough because the ball was up and in.
The set by Gossage. The pitch deep to right field. Holy cow, I don't believe it. Home run for George Brett.
George! And now the Royals have the 1-run lead.
And I'm crossing home plate, and I vaguely remember seeing Billy Martin up at home plate. I think he's talking to the umpire to go talk to the pitcher for some reason.
And Billy Martin, he wants to take a look at that bat. Well, that's a little late. I don't believe it.
Well, I'm sitting there and I'm just minding my own business. I'm going, what are they talking about?
Hey, they might have a point here. Thurman Munson was called out after getting a base hit because there is pine tar above the trademark.
The week before, Billy Martin had said about George having that bat, and the pine tar was getting higher and higher in the bat.
Billy Martin, trying to outsmart the world, waited until after he hit the home run.
Come on. Come on, this man had hit a ball 9 miles, and you're gonna come up with some kind of chintzy deal. Billy always had some kind of an angle.
First time in a long, long time I've seen the umpires huddle this long and have a meeting over it. Now that is the plate umpire, Tim McClellan, with the bat in his hand. Now they're going to measure it across home plate.
Well, I've never seen this.
I never have either.
And I leaned over to George. I said, George, I think you're out. I think they're going to call you out.
And I'm going, I've never heard of that before, Frank.
He said, they call me out, I'm going to go nuts.
If he calls me out, I'm going to blankety blank blank. And I'm like, ooh, this is going to be interesting.
And Martin has a very valid argument here. And if he wins this, there will be chaos.
McCullen just turns around and just goes like this.
They might be going to call George Brett out.
Well, the Yankees win. He's out.
Yes, sir.
Brett is out. Look at this.
It was a pretty exciting moment.
You see him sprinting out there?
I thought I kind of walked out, and then I see the video of it after it happened, and my arms are going crazy.
Brett is out.
He's steaming mad.
I would have maybe gone out there, but a little bit more nonchalant, let's talk about this.
He had his hand down like he was going to hit him.
Forcibly restrained from hitting plate umpire Tim McClellan.
I'm not stupid enough to hit an umpire. Plus, he's 6'5". But what made it look bad is Joe Brinkman when he was pulling me away. And he's kind of got me in a chokehold. All I'm trying to do is get away.
They are holding George Brett out there.
Can you remember anything that was screamed?
Yeah. Can't say it on TV, though, can I?
Sure you can.
Huh?
Absolutely.
I can say it?
Yeah.
What the is this? You gotta be f***ing me. There's no f***ing way you could make that f***ing call. You f***ing asshole. Just going off.
Well, the game's over. That's right. He is called out, and the Yankees win the game 4-3.
There are so many wonderful elements of the Pine Tar game, including the fact that it was overturned. The call was overturned. The fact that the home run counted.
The decision to resume was not announced until 4 p.m. when an appellate court judge said, "Play ball, you will play."
The Yankees did everything they could to stall the resumption of play. But in late August, the Royals came back to New York on their way to a trip to Baltimore to conclude the game, leading 5-4 in the top of the ninth.
Only 1,200 fans showed up to take their place in baseball history.
Well, in 10 years, you can say I was at the Pine Tar game, the completion of the Pine Tar game.
What's been the most amazing thing about this whole scenario? How do you sum this whole thing up?
Amazing. Media interest. It's just kind of good for baseball, really.
Where is Brett?
I don't really know.
A little Italian restaurant close to LaGuardia, sitting at the bar and having a little snack and maybe a bottle of wine and a cold beer, and watch the outcome on a little TV behind the bar, a little black and white TV, which was pretty cool.
No, George Brett was not with the Royals. He was ejected.
It was just more the lineup itself. You had people all over the place. I think Guidry was in center field.
Ron Guidry is in center field. Don Mattingly is at second base.
The funny part was Billy Martin coming out, and he used to want to know if George touched first.
And a field play to first base.
These are not the same umpiring crew that was here before. They're going to field a second base now.
Now, Billy could come out and say, wait a minute, fellas, how do you know that Brett touched second base because you were not here?
That's right.
He had an affidavit from the other umpires.
Dave Phillips right there, Bobby, may have a sworn affidavit from one of the umpires in the other crew. So we add just a little more drama to the infamous Pine Tar game.
It didn't take more than about 8 minutes to finish up the game.
And that may do it. Frank White over to John Wathan, and the Pine Tar game is over.
Then we all jumped back on the airplane and went to Baltimore. But the whole thing was so unusual That's why everybody still remembers and talks about it.
When I was a kid, that was my favorite. Like, turn the VCR on. Dad, we want to see you go crazy. We want to see you go crazy.
Brett is called out for using an illegal bat.
It's a great scene. It's a great piece of footage. I think it shows George's intensity.
It's one of the iconic moments in the history of the game.
I get a call from Joe Brinkman. I get a call every year. Joe sent me a can of pine tar one time in the mail on the anniversary of it. I got a can of pine tar. He says, bring back good memories.
Going into '85, I don't think anybody saw them as a real World Series threat.
Hi, boys and girls.
They had some young pitching, but the offense was clearly not going to score a lot of runs, and they needed George to be George again. He'd been an all-star, been a good player, but he had not been that sort of epic player that they needed him to be.
And that was the message that Royals co-owner Avron Fogelman conveyed to him in no uncertain terms that offseason.
He invited me down to play golf for 3 or 4 days, and I went to some meetings with him, and he kind of laid the law down to me. He says, here I have all the confidence in the world. I'm paying you more than anybody on the team, and you don't take care of yourself. I was getting heavier. He could tell some day games I wasn't all there, and so he told me, he says, you better straighten up and fly right and get yourself in the best shape of your life, and so I did. That's the first year ever I worked out in the off-season. That's what spring training used to be for.
The Royal trainers put together this program that I stayed on for 8 weeks, lost about 35 pounds.
My stomach, he had lines on it, and I couldn't get a ball out of the cage. I don't know what it was. And all of a sudden they said, you look too skinny, you got to gain 10 pounds.
Well, I just thought George was losing weight because he wanted to do it, but it worked out well for him.
Ripped to left field.
There it goes. George Brett with his 3rd hit of the day. His 2nd home run of the night. There he goes again.
Boy, he is doing that consistently.
There is George Brett at his best.
It would be an incredible season for him at the plate. A .335 batting average and a career-high 30 home runs. And just as impressive was in his 12th big league season, his first ever Gold Glove.
He's there. Oh, what a play by Brett while on his knees. Line, but Brett spears it.
Our motto was good pitching, play good defense, and with George in the lineup, we always felt like we had a shot.
George Brett does it again.
I mean, this wasn't nothing on the field he couldn't do.
And he was never better than the last week of the season, as the Royals battled the Angels for the AL West Division title.
It was just one of those things. I got hot at the right time.
In the final 6 games, Brett had 5 homers and 13 RBIs and hit .450.
KC would win the division by a game, lifting them into the ALCS and a matchup with the Blue Jays.
Batting third. At third base, number 5, George Brett.
But the Royals would drop the first 2 games of the best-of-7 series in Toronto.
And they'll take a 2-0 lead to Kansas City on the Al Oliver base hit.
The only consolation for the Royals. There's still time to regroup. See you Friday in KC.
So they were down 2-0. George went to his teammates and said, just ride my back. I just follow me.
Everybody says I said before the game, jump on, I'll carry you guys. No, I never said that. I was never that confident. I always had a lot of confidence in my ability, but you don't know who's going to show up. I always played better when I was nervous. Always did. When you're nervous, that means it's important.
Brett's first at-bat would come with 2 out in the bottom of the 1st against Toronto's Doyle Alexander.
A ball and a strike to Brett. Well hit deep right. If it stays fair, the Royals are in front. And they are. Home run Brett.
1-0. Next at-bat, I didn't get my arms extended all the way. They were a little chicken arm, a little kind of ear.
Well hit to right again. Is this number 2?
Hit it good. Thought it was a home run.
Off the top of the wall. He missed number 2 by inches.
It's very difficult for a position player to dominate a game. He's only going to get 4, maybe 5 at-bats, right? Well, it just was one of those games where everything clicked.
Slaps it. Brett makes a fine play and comes home. What a play!
You give me 50 chances, I couldn't have made that play. But I made it that day.
Yeah, you can smile, George. Why not?
Still, despite Brett's heroics, Toronto got to Brett Saberhagen and took a 5-3 lead into the bottom of the 6th, only for Brett to find himself with a big opportunity when he came up with a runner on.
Now, let's be honest. There are some players that do not want to be at home plate with the game on the line. George reveled in it, embraced it, loved it, and usually delivered.
I always thought of myself as a clutch player. I think the more nervous I was, the more clutch I was.
Alexander has to come to him in this situation. Wilson at first, nobody out. Well hit to left center. Back goes Mosby, along with Bell. Forget it! Home run Brett! George Brett certainly has no superior and may have no equal as a showcase player in all of baseball. Any second now, he'll be coming out for the curtain call, and there he is.
George willed the Royals to win Game 3.
Ground ball. Well, he's in a slump. It's only a single, and he's 4 for 4.
That was the best game by far I've ever played in my life.
It's popped up, and appropriately it will be Brett. Kansas City wins it.
He'd almost single-handedly won the game and would hit .348 overall in the series as the Royals went on to win it in 7 games and put themselves in the Fall Classic. They'd call it the I-70 Series, a face-off between two Missouri teams separated by 250 highway miles. It would go back and forth until the Royals found themselves on the verge of elimination in Game 6.
The Cardinals 3 outs away from the second World Championship in 4 seasons.
It was the bottom of the 9th, and they were trailing 1-0 as George Orta led off against Todd Burrell.
Little squibber to the right side.
I was sitting in the first base dugout, so we had a pretty good view of what was going on.
Worrell races over to cover. The throw doesn't get him. Worrell got to the bag in an argument here, and here comes Herzog.
The play just wasn't smooth. And I could have swore sitting in the first base dugout that he was safe.
Looks like he's out. Well, I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Guess what? He was out. Fortunately for us, he called him safe.
First base umpire is Dinkinger, American League.
The people in St. Louis to this day still think it was Game 7 because they think they lost the World Series on that call. They still dropped a pop-up that inning.
And Clark doesn't know where he is.
They still had a pass ball.
That gets away from Porter, and the runners move up.
And they still blame that on Dankinger.
And that's a looper hitting the right field for a base hit. Here comes Sunburn. Here's the throw. He scores. We go to a 7th.
I think we played 174 ball games this year. That's the first time we got beat in the 9th inning. I thought the guy was out at first base. I'm pretty perturbed about that call.
For crying out loud, St. Louis, and I have friends that live in St. Louis. Don Dankinger, you made a bad call. Made a bad call. If they call him out, we still might have won the game. You don't know. That was Game 6.
We're not dead yet. One more time, baby. One more time.
Come out and play Game 7. That's all you had to do was play Game 7.
And the pitcher's again drilled to left field, hooking down the line, and gone. A 2-0 lead. 3-0 Royals. 6-0. 8-0. They're in double figures, and it's 11-0 as this massacre goes on.
You didn't show up for Game 7, you lost 11-0. Suck on it.
It's over right away. So they knew they were going to win.
This Kansas City team and their fans are ready to start celebrating.
I think George, having gone through everything he had gone through, he understood the moment in a way that certainly the young guys did not. This was not, hey, the first of many. This was the crescendo moment.
There's 2 outs in the top of the 9th inning, and I go up to Brett and I said, hey, look, this guy's going to make the last out of the game. and don't go running all over the place, because I said, I've been through this a lot and never won, and I want to be the first one on the mound to congratulate you.
To Motley for the title.
It was a moment I'll never forget.
The Kansas City Royals are the 1985 World Champions.
When you win a World Series, I don't care if you were Al Zape, the equipment manager, Joe Coronia, the guy that shined the shoes. Everybody in that locker room feels exactly the same as you do. And it is so powerful.
Does it feel like you thought it would?
Unbelievable.
Can you believe it?
And here's George Brett, the greatest hitter in baseball today. George, say hello to President Reagan. Mr. Reagan.
Listen, just congratulations for a great effort. All of you can be very proud.
Well, thank you very much.
George without a World Series title is not the same as George with a World Series title. I mean, that's just the hard reality of sports. So yeah, everything kind of changed for him in that way in 1985.
There he is, Mr. Kansas City Royal.
Tell you a funny story. It came up, I made a lot of throwing errors. And whenever I'd make a throwing error, all these people sitting over here would just start screaming at me, you know? So all of a sudden I'm playing third base for 16 years. They brought up a young guy named Kevin Seitzer, play third base. So they moved me to first. I think it was opening day. He throws one in the dirt. I go to get it and I miss it. Everybody starts screaming at me at first. You gotta catch that ball. And I turned around and I said, did you all f***ing move your seats from third base to first base just to give me Can't win. You can't win.
By the late 80s, George Brett was approaching the twilight of his career. The hits still came, and the average stayed high. But years of wear and tear were taking their toll. And after a slow start to 1990,
Strike three call.
questions began to surface about whether Brett's career was approaching its end.
Boy, that's about as upset as I have ever seen George Brett.
He's 37, the body is breaking down. You know, his first half was the sort of bad that makes you think, oh, this is over.
He is thinking very seriously about retiring.
I remember going into Boston. I got up to bat and it was late in the game. I got a standing ovation. Going, what the hell's this? Well, what I didn't realize is the talk show hosts and the papers are saying George Brett's over the hill. He can't play anymore. Everybody assumed it was going to be the last time that I'd be playing there. At the All-Star break, I don't know what I was hitting, 250, 260 maybe. And I said, okay, you can put on a charge and go out there and bust your ass the rest of the year, or you can just pack it in. So I just said, screw it, I'm going all in.
But he is just locked in on a swing.
The second half has been like a fountain of youth for me. I feel young, I feel great. It's fun to come to the ballpark again.
I remember the second half of that season, it was unbelievable. I mean, every night it was multiple hits. It wasn't a 1 for 4. I mean, it was multiple hits, a lot of games. But he just got locked in, and you could tell that he was on somewhat of a mission.
Boy, George really swinging a magic wand, didn't he?
Ended up having the second half of a lifetime and went from hitting 260 to hitting 329 and win a batting championship, which was incredible.
It's going to be one of the biggest thrills of my career. You know, in April and May, I struggled so bad, and to come back and finish the way I did is a tremendous thrill for me.
He won the batting title in 3 decades, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. That isn't talked about that much, but I think that's one of the coolest things that he ever accomplished.
Pretty impressive. From Kansas City, ladies and gentlemen, say hello to George Brett. George, come on out.
Even as his career neared its finish line, Brett was still a massive star whose appeal transcended the baselines. But even as he enjoyed his continued popularity, life for maybe baseball's most eligible bachelor was about to change.
All I know is my brother Ken played 12 years in the big leagues. Never got married when he was playing in the big leagues. And I saw the lifestyle he had, and I kind of liked that. And I just decided that I was going to wait until I couldn't wait any longer, and that's when I met my wife.
I think timing is everything, and when we met, I think he was 37. I think he was ready to kind of settle down.
It was pretty apparent once Leslie came into George's life that he had found the one. But it was a change for George. At that stage, it was Leslie, and it wasn't George the bachelor.
When we decided to get married, we did it really, really quickly. And then I probably got pregnant within 4 or 5 months. If that's not going to change your life, I don't know what is.
My life has changed because my priorities have changed a little bit. But baseball still is very, very, very important in my life. My performance, the team's performance, still very important, but not as important as my family.
If it was the happiest time in George Brett's life to that point, soon after he got married, the joy would be shaded when his father's health began to drastically deteriorate. It had been the most complicated relationship in his life, and it would stay that way through their final conversation before Jack Brett passed away.
He asked me that night, how'd you do yesterday in your game? You got any hits? And I said, no, 0 for 4, but I hit a good 3 times. And he said, that happens, you know. I think I popped up, struck out twice, you know, hitting double play or something. But I didn't even tell him he's on his deathbed, and I lied to him.
For his entire career, George Brett's desire to prove himself to his father had been fundamentally connected to his drive for greatness. But even after his dad passed away, there were more mountains ahead.
The countdown for George Brett to the 3,000 mark.
And just as much desire to climb them.
I'm 4 hits away. We have a 4-game series in Anaheim. I go to the ballpark that day, and I'm trying to swing, and I can't swing. I'm going, you gotta be kidding me. Tuesday, get there, taking dry swings, not good enough. Get there Wednesday, taking some swings, hitting off a tee. I'm going, okay, if I can swing 80%, boom, yeah, feels good, okay. Hal McRae, I can play.
It was insane. He was hurt. He was so hurt that he couldn't even put on his shoes that day. We didn't even know if he was going to start the game. And one of his brothers stayed in Palm Springs because George said, I'm not going to play, and if I play, I'm going to do terrible. So his brother JB stayed in the desert, and then he started watching the game, and he got 1 hit. Then he got another hit. And then I think he jumped in his car and started to drive towards Anaheim.
George tonight with a double, a single, and another single. He has 2,999 hits.
Getting something of that magnitude, that important, you're not going to get it your first at bat, because you're gonna feel a pressure, and you're going to be too tense, and your swing won't be as fluid.
I think a lot of us were like, just make an out so that you can go back to Kansas City and get it in Kansas City, but no.
It happened before I even knew it. They bring in a lefty, Tim Fortuno, first pitch, throws a fastball, boom.
Drift on 1 hop off over belt into right field. George Brett with a 4 for 4 night in Southern California has his 3,000th hit.
It was crazy. Like, he went 4 for 4, and it was just insane. It was kind of a surreal experience.
I saw him walk on the on-deck circle, and I started crying because I knew he was going to do it.
What a moment of baseball history here at Anaheim Stadium.
Another cool thing, my brother Ken was in the booth, and he got the call.
Mobbed by his teammates here at Anaheim Stadium. And for you, Ken Brett, I know it's a thrill to see your little brother get it.
Well, I tell you what, I couldn't be prouder, I couldn't be happier.
I remember a comment that he made.
I know one thing, I think I'm going to get home a little bit late tonight.
And we did.
Party time.
Hey, I couldn't have done it without you.
Here's the newest member of baseball's 3,000 hit club.
Thank you all.
Returning home to Kansas City after his 3,000th hit, late in the 1992 season, life for George Brett couldn't have seemed better. But questions lingered about what was next, inside Brett's head and evidently in the mind of Royals owner Ewing Kauffman.
The year I got 3,000 hits, he says, well, are you going to play next year or not? I had 1 year left on my contract. And I said, I don't know, I'm going to call some people. I just got 3,000 hits. Do I really want to play anymore or what? Then that's when I say, well, if you were me, Mr. Kauffman, what would you do? And he looked at me and he said, if I was you, I would retire and let a younger, more deserving player play. I thought that was kind of a weird thing to say. You would think that I had 1 year left on my contract. Can you just get 3,000 hits? And now the guy wants you to retire?
Now, they had a love-hate relationship, but how dare he say that to him? I think Mr. Kauffman was great to George, but that night, for whatever reason, he said that to George.
I said, you know what? I'm playing, just to piss him off.
He might have been turning 40, but George Brett with a chip on his shoulder was still George Brett.
George Brett continues to tear apart American League pitching.
But as his 21st big league season went on, as much as the numbers were still there, he could feel the desire start to wane.
I led the team in home runs and RBIs and thought I wasn't a good player. I hit 268, the lowest I think I've hit in the big leagues.
He was still the best player on our team. It just wasn't the George Brett that George Brett wanted to be.
It was hard to go to the ballpark. And that's when I knew it was time to retire. I just knew. I said, I don't get goosebumps anymore when I do something good. I don't get mad if the team loses and I do something bad. I'm just like a guy that's collecting a paycheck. And I always believe that the game deserves more than that from its players.
In order for George to be George Brett, he had to be the first one there. He had to take batting practice until his hands bled. That's what made him George Brett. And there comes a moment when you're like, I don't want to be that person anymore. Like, this is it. I've done it. I've had my career. I've had my success. And now it's time for whatever comes next.
I knew I was going to retire at the All-Star break, but I didn't say anything. I think I retired with maybe a week to go in the season. That's when I had my announcement that I wasn't going to come back.
I mean, this is my decision. If I had known I didn't want to play anymore, I was ready to accept the fact that I'm not the player I once was. But when you've been doing something for 23 years, 24 years professionally, 20 years in the major leagues, and you say goodbye, it's difficult.
It was emotional, understanding that that stage of George's baseball life was coming to an end.
Still, before walking away, there was time for one final farewell in Kansas City.
There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Get a good look at him.
And a chance for the fans who he'd thrilled all those years to say thanks.
Hopefully we can have a lot of fun tonight, go out with a bang and spend the rest of my life in Kansas City. Thank you all so much.
Got up and got a base hit my last at-bat.
Through for a base hit. George Brett has finished with a base hit.
These fans in Kansas City, they love that man.
A salute to George Brett one more time here in Kansas City as he winds up his great career here at Kauffman Stadium.
Good friend of mine, Hank Bauer. I remember him saying all the time, talking about players that couldn't play in his era. He should kiss home plate every time he gets to the ballpark. As soon as I saw him, I said, I got to go kiss home plate. And I did. Then my career was over. Pretty cool.
Two decades with one franchise. Too many hard-to-believe moments to count. In 1999, for George Brett, the sense was that all of it would add up to baseball immortality in Cooperstown.
The night before you get the call, my wife had talked to somebody there. Okay, tomorrow they're going to call between 10 and 11:30. Okay, fine. Phone rings about 10:30. I'm going, okay. Have you heard anything yet? Nope. About 10:45, phone rings. Somebody else calling. 11:45. Nothing. I'm saying to myself, well, how long do I got to sit around here and wait? They might not be calling. I'm not going to sit here all day. 10 minutes later, they called. And then, you know, they told me, and it was pretty emotional at the house.
I think we all thought it was probably going to happen, but until that phone rang, until he got the call, we didn't know for sure. And then it was just like a whirlwind.
Police escort to the downtown airport, get on a private plane, fly to New York. How cool was that?
Why are we here?
You inducted.
For what? Look at the camera and you say it.
The Hall of Fame.
Was that a good thing or a bad thing, son?
It was amazing. It was really a great, fun summer. It's great memories.
1999 Hall of Fame inductee, George Brett.
To have one of the biggest honors bestowed upon you, it's a pretty special weekend. It's a weekend I'll never forget. Hey, Stan, these are my 3 boys.
Say, nice meeting you, Stan. Can you say that?
The great George Brett.
Congratulations to you guys.
Hey, rookie, how you doing?
Perfect.
It kind of reminds you of the 7th game of the World Series, you know? Not sweating yet. You have all this anxiety and nervousness in your system and tension that you just can't wait to get it over with. Hey, Tommy.
Great day for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations and good luck.
And it was so cool for him to go in with Robin and with Nolan.
Special day. Yeah.
If I was to literally hand-pick players to go in with, I don't think I could have hand-picked a better group.
4 great guys right here, right?
Yes.
4 great guys.
The hardest speech you'll ever have to make.
I have been sitting in the hot seat over here for about 2 hours, wondering if I was going to be able to get through this thing.
He did a great job. I thought his speech was great.
Thank you, Kansas City. Today concludes a long journey that has taken me from Southern California throughout America, and I stand humbly before you today in Cooperstown. It is such an honor to stand here and to be inducted with such good friends. I dreamt the same way Nolan did, and I dreamt the same way Robin did. And this is a dream come true.
The Hall of Fame, it's a fraternity like no other. It's like being in the clubhouse again. You just don't play the game.
I went to Vegas.
You could put 5 or 6 old Hall of Famers together and we could talk for 5 hours, 6 hours. You know, you can give us a few beers and, you know, you could double that. We all ate together in the plaque room. The feeling inside, you get your heart pumping a little bit, and you really sense how special it is to be a Hall of Famer.
It's really a respect that you have, and that ties you together because you know the effort that it takes, the commitment that it takes to be an elite player. And I think it's really cool to say that George Brett is my friend.
It's definitely been a life changer. It's given me so many thrills to be able to go to Cooperstown now and call these guys my friends. You know, that's the best part about it. Okay. Should warn you guys, I'm not a very good driver. I've played 20 years in big leagues, and I've been a Hall of Famer for 24 years. But I've been a Royal since 1971, so, you know, it's crazy. It's my 52nd year in the organization. That's mind-boggling to me.
30 years after he retired, George Brett's connection with the Royals is as strong as ever. He's been vice president of baseball operations for the club since he hung up his cleats.
You know how they do these things? You give them money and anyways, we have one. My family put one in. Thanks for a lifetime of memories, the Brett family. And I don't know where it is.
I think his role has been, I'm George Brett for many, many years. to sort of guide the principles of the organization.
We got action.
I think he loves being able to meet people.
And it drives me crazy. I'm trying to watch the game, and you're doing backflips and running around yelling and screaming.
He's such an icon in Kansas City. He's everybody's childhood.
You know what they call this room? Pine Tar Productions. Perfect. Isn't that what this is? Pine Tar Productions? Pine Tar Collective. Yeah.
To roam around during the games, to sit with the owner, to hobnob with different sponsors.
Hey, Rusty, how are you? Good to see you.
He's really good at that. I used to tease him and say, "You're Slugger in a blazer." That's basically what he is. He's like their mascot in a blue blazer.
The life he's gotten to live, I think he really loves it. And Kansas City's the perfect place for him.
Brett's lived in Kansas City just about as long as he's been a Royal. It's where he still makes his home today, where his family roots feel the strongest.
We try to have dinner every Sunday night. Every Sunday night, usually. We try to.
All the boys live within a couple miles of us, and we try to get together as a family once a week for dinner. We call it family dinner, and usually on a Sunday.
This is a tri-tip. It's a really popular dish in California. Earlier, I got some garlic cloves and sliced them up real thin and got some rosemary. We'll take it to 120, and then we're going to let it breathe a little bit. And we're just going to have some sandwiches tonight. Onions, peppers, we got beans and salad. It's going to be a fun night.
Our boys are very close in age, and they're very close friends, and they get along great with their dad.
I hope you're farther than me.
But you've played 10,000 more rounds of golf in your life.
Yeah, but still.
I don't know about that. You play like every day. It's called networking.
We barbecue and watch sports, and they have this banter back and forth amongst themselves. They're kind of like a little clan, and George is part of that clan.
A lot of these guys, they get married at 22, 23. They have a kid. First 13 years of his life, you're gone. Probably weighing into my decision to wait and get married, and then have the opportunity and the wherewithal and the time to be a part of their lives.
It was unbelievable. I mean, he was at every Little League game. And it was cool of him because he didn't coach just my team. He was never anybody's head coach. He was always the assistant. And he was just at all three of our games all the time. High school games, high school freshman football games, wrestling tournaments. If we had an event and he was in town, he was there.
Did anybody check the tri-tip?
Last time I checked, it was me. Oh, it's done. It's done, boys.
What's it at?
130.
Let it rest.
7.
Did you burn it?
No.
Tri-tip.
Yeah, that was bad job. Dad screwed that one up.
Oh, God, look how well done that is. That sucks. God, I overcooked it.
He wanted to do tri-tip sandwiches, and thankfully we did because he overcooked them.
I really screwed up the tri-tip because I came over here and talked. You know, you said, hey, go over there and talk to these guys. And I came over here, and then I just kind of lost track. I overcooked it by about 5 minutes. I'd say maybe 8 minutes. To be a part of their lives and have dinner with them and cook out with them, and yeah, it's been good. It's been really a lot of fun. Hey guys, raise your glass, please. Travel. Cheers to my family. I love you. I really do. Thanks for all the memories. Lovely. And there's a lot more memories to come.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
Memories are what surround George Brett everywhere he goes. When you've had as many good ones as he has, they're almost like best friends. But there are also other things he still remembers, like his relationship with the father, who never quite seemed to embrace him.
I woke up one day, it was crazy. I told my wife this. I woke up one day, it was about 6 months ago, and I said, you know what? My dad was really an asshole. Before, I would always cry thinking about him. No, I'm not going to cry about him. He was a bad dad. He was a bad father and a bad dad.
He just had this awakening one day to where he just decided he wasn't going to make things up about his dad anymore. He wasn't that nice of a man.
I have a lot of friends that were pretty good athletes, Never made it. Maybe they didn't have the drive I had to please their father. And then to be the most successful one in the family, I think that's part of the reason why.
Deep down in his mind, he wanted to prove his dad wrong. And I think he did.
The truth is that George Brett at 70 is not much different from the California kid who swooped into Kansas City a half-century ago and never left. His piercing blue eyes still betray a hint of mischief. His walk is still a confident swagger. His love of a good time still clear with every hearty laugh he lets out. Hearing him tell the story of his life is like going back in time. Even if you get the sense that George Brett is as happy as ever right where he is. He'll always be part of the history of baseball and Kansas City. He'll always be the star of one of the best stories the game has ever told.
What he did here will always remain, just like a movie reel in my mind. Just, turn it on again and let it roll.
Here's third baseman George Brett.
High drive, hit to right field. It's gone.
When you play as long as he did and do the things that he did, I really just helped put the Royals on the map. I think these are things that people remember.
Well, he is. He's out. Yes, sir. Brett is out. Look at this. Brett is out. And the team is back.
George Brett is the Royals. He did everything you could ever want to do as a baseball player in Kansas City and his whole career. So, in my opinion, George Brett is the Royals.
I don't imagine his legacy is going to fade. I would imagine there's going to be a few things around that's going to remind people of George Brett. George is just a name that is going to live, I think, forever in Kansas City.
Number 3,000 for one of the great players of all time, George Brett, number 5 of the Kansas City Royals. I think that everybody knows number 5 in Kansas City, that left-hand swing and his production and performance. And they talk about the greatest number 5s. There's Johnny Bench, there's Brooks Robinson, and there's Joe D. When you call out the greatest, it might be first, it might be last, but you're going to call him out when they talk about the greatest number 5s.
I exceeded everything I set out to do. I know that. I didn't think even playing in the minor leagues during high school or Little League, and even my first couple of years in the big leagues, believe me, I never thought all this stuff would be accomplished. You look back at it, and there's going to be a generation of people that have never heard of me. There's probably a lot of people that come to the games now that never heard of me. And maybe their dad or their granddad brings them out here and say, I watched this guy play, he was pretty good. It is pretty special. It was a fun run. If I had to do it over again, I would do it exactly the same way.
You remember when you were over here filming for the documentary? And then you said, George, go over and talk to your kids for 10 minutes. We want to get some video. And then I'll cook these 2 tri-tips, and they were well done. If I wouldn't have had to do that, just look at that. Is that perfect or what? Look at that. You ruined my dinner, James, by making me talk to my kids, and they're here right now. I talk to them all the time.